Storytime, my sister and I live in the same house, but we haven't spoken to each other in 2 years. So a little background information, I was 17 years old and a junior in high school, and my sister was only a year younger than me, so she was 16 and a sophomore in high school. My sister struggled a lot in school with making friends because she wasn't very likable. She had a really bad attitude, she would bully people all the time about their appearances, so naturally this made her quite a few enemies. And I just so happened to be really good friends with the older siblings of the kids that she would bully. And they were always coming to me saying, hey, get a hold of your sister before we do. And whenever I would warn her about this, she would literally say that she didn't care and she wishes somebody would confront her about it. Now, my sister did have a group of friends who all were notorious for loving fighting and bullying others as well. So in my head, I was like, okay, at least she has them to back her up. However, things took a turn for the worse whenever she took some inappropriate photos of a girl changing in the locker room and shared them around the whole school. This girl was a freshman and she just so happened to be a sibling of one of the girls in my sister's group. She also had another sister who was a Part 2, my sister and I live in the same house, but we haven't spoken to each other in 2 years. So like I said, my sister took some pictures of this girl in the locker room and sent them around the whole school. And this girl's older sister was a part of my sister's friend group. I didn't know about this until rumors reached me that my sister was going to be jumped after school. So instead of going straight to my boyfriend's house after school that day, I drove her home instead. The next day, my best friend texted me in the morning saying, hey, you might want to walk around with your sister because they're going to try to get her in the locker room. So my best friend and I took turns all day watching after my sister. And sure enough, whenever we went into the locker room with her, there were 7 girls waiting to fight her. Here's the thing, I'm not a fighter. Fighting isn't fair to begin with, so I picked up this metal scooter next to me, and I just start swinging it at them. Thankfully, security guards and teachers intervened before anything terrible happened. They looked at my sister as the victim, so all of us ended up getting suspended except for her. Fast forward after my suspension, I go back to school. Everything was normal until I went to the library during lunch. All of the girls who got suspended plus 5 more girls were all staring at me. Like for part 3. Part 3, my sister and I live in the same house, but we haven't spoken to each other in 2 years. So like I said, everyone except for my sister got suspended, which I don't even know how that happened. But fast forward after my suspension, I returned to school and everything was normal until I went to the library during lunch. When I got there, those same girls that got suspended plus 5 more girls were all staring at me while I was walking over to my table to go study and eat. And then I see this one girl that is known for fighting, so she has to have a security guard with her at all times. Like, this guy literally had her on a leash 24/7. So when I didn't see him with her, that's when I knew it was time for me to get up and go. So I grab all my things and I go to walk out of the library. And then all of a sudden, I feel someone yank my hair and it was over for me. All those girls ended up getting suspended again, and I ended up getting suspended for that picture because my sister went around and told everyone in school that it was me who took the picture and I was the one bullying that girl online through fake accounts. And my sister told everybody that I was going to be in the library during lunch that day. Her and I still live at our parents' house, but we do not speak to each other at all.
Get ready with me to go to Candlelight Spring, a tribute to Coldplay. My skin barrier is ruined, so I have Aquaphor on, so I don't really know how much makeup we're going to be able to get away with today. I swear, I'm literally always doing something to my skin. Like, why can't I just take a break? Well, it is what it is. I'm low-key running late, but I love the band Coldplay, and they're going to be playing some of my favorite songs. I'm telling you guys right now, this highlighter is literally the best highlighter on earth, especially for nose contour. Okay, I'm running late, but this is the fit. I'm wearing my Skims dress, and this is the makeup. I love you. Bye.
Part 2 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, no license, but I had a car and I let her drive that night. And she went to my ex-boyfriend's house. Now, her and him used to be close whenever him and I were dating. And I didn't think anything of it until she called him and she kept telling him to come outside of his house so we could fight him. And I'm telling her to stop, but she just keeps laughing the whole time and she always does shit like this. And I was tired of being pulled into shit like this because then I got named the psycho stalker girl. So then I find out that after she went home that night, she texted my ex with this whole elaborate story about how I was the one who made her drive to his house and say all that shit. So fast forward, her and I got into it at school because I told a counselor that she was threatening to unalive herself because I was really worried for her. But then she starts posting stuff about my mental health on social media, saying things like, oh, she has zebra stripe arms. And I fought her after that. Because the only reason why I told our counselor is because I gave a shit about her mental health, like for part 3. Story time about how my best friend got my house raided. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade, and we're gonna call my best friend Jenna. Jenna and I have been on and off friends since elementary school. Now, the reason why we were on and off friends was because Jenna was the type of person who ended up in drama all the time. And coincidentally, anytime that I would stop being her friend, I would be in no drama. Now, there have been multiple times where I've tried to break off our friendship for good, but Jenna, of course, was the type of girl who would threaten to unalive herself whenever things didn't go her way. And I low-key have a savior complex. Also, I literally lived right across the street from her. So it was very hard to cut this friendship off. Well, anyways, fast forward, so her and I are friends, which also wasn't good because she was a very bad influence on me. For example, I didn't have a driver's license, but I had a car. So of course I would go pick her up and her and I would fuck shit up together, aka do bad things. Well, the one night I let her drive and she ended up going to my ex-boyfriend's house, like for part 3 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, she posted stuff online about my mental health, and then her and we ended up fighting at school, and her mom decided to press charges. But then I ended up showing the cops everything that she had said to me online and all the bullying that she was doing, and how she would literally blackmail me into being friends with her. And this made Jenna and Jenna's mom super unhappy, so they ended up filing a false report about me to the police, saying that I have illegal stuff in my house, and I do this, and I do that, and I plan on unaliving my mom. Like, what the fuck? So in the middle of the night, my whole family and I are woken up by this loud banging on our front door. So my mom, hurry up, go open the door, and they're saying that they have a warrant, and come to find out, the only thing that they could find were a bunch of empty vapes, which my mom was not happy about. And yeah, my mom and I's relationship is super rocky sometimes, but I would never try to unalive her. Story time about how my sister sold my nudes. Yes, my own sister. So a little background information, I was in 12th grade and I was pretty popular. And my sister, on the other hand, she was in 9th grade. I'm not even saying this to boost my ego, but she was jealous of me and everybody could tell. Mainly because of the fact that she didn't have her high school glow up, you know, she low-key still looked like a 6th grader. And there were very few guys who gave her attention, and some of the guys would even tell her that I was hotter than her. So that did not help the situation at all. Not like I even paid attention to any of these guys because I had a boyfriend. And my sister and I still shared a room even though our brothers got their own rooms. So she could literally go through my shit anytime she wanted. Well, since we shared a room and I'd never thought that she would sell my nudes, sometimes I would take these exposing pictures of myself while she was in the room. Well, she had this one friend named Jessica who also was weirdly obsessed with me. One night she was saying how funny it would be to sell someone's nudes. Like, story time about how my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. Little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade, and I have never had a boyfriend before. Any guy that I was sort of talking to, we never made it out of the talking stage. But fast forward, I met this one guy who we're gonna call Jake, and because of how tragic my love life was, I didn't expect us to get into a relationship, but he ended up asking me to be his girlfriend. So of course I said yes. I was super excited that I had a boyfriend, and then he met my family. And my older sister and I were like super close, so I told her all about him, and she just couldn't wait to meet him. Real quick, I just want to give a big shout out to Lumino for sponsoring today's video. Lumino Whitening Kit is one of the best ways to whiten your teeth without paying hundreds of dollars, especially if you have sensitive teeth. This is the next best thing. Although I have veneers, they only cover the front of my teeth, so my teeth can still be very sensitive to certain chemicals that other brands use in their products. If you guys want to go check out their 7-pack for under $15, the link is in my bio. So whenever he met my sister, she was being super talkative to him, and I thought it was just because she was excited to meet him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found out my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. So like I said, he came over, he met my sister, they got along super well. Fast forward, my parents decided to have a family gathering, and my sister was like begging me to invite my boyfriend, which I didn't plan on inviting him at all because my family is super annoying and would make a big deal about the fact that this is my first boyfriend. She was like, okay, but if you guys are seriously in a relationship, I think that he should meet your family. So I ended up inviting him. So my mom called me to the kitchen to help pass out drinks, which was super annoying because my sister was literally doing fucking nothing. So after I'm done with that, I'm looking for my boyfriend and he's nowhere to be found. So I go upstairs, and as I'm about to walk up the stairs, both of them come down. And when I asked what was wrong, like why they were upstairs together, she was like, oh, I was showing him to the bathroom, which I felt super weird about, but because she was my sister, I let it go because you're supposed to trust your family. Part 3 about how my sister got with my boyfriend. So things started to get really sus because every time that he would come over, they would always find a way to be alone with each other. So fast forward, my sister and I are supposed to go to one of her friends' parties. The whole time though, she kept asking me if I would invite my boyfriend. And no offense, I love my boyfriend, but I need space away from him sometimes. And not to mention, I felt like I was dragging him around like a dog because she was the one who would want me to invite him everywhere. Fast forward, I end up inviting him to the party. My sister gets super drunk, really sick, and my boyfriend offers to take her to the bathroom. And I was like, excuse me, I'm her sister. I can do that. Thank you very much. So after I say that, my sister looks at me and she was like, I would appreciate it if you would just stop being like this because I feel super sick right now. Like, okay, play the victim. Anyway, so I go to check on them in the bathroom. They're not in there. And one of the bedroom doors was open, so when I went in there, I saw them doing the nasty. I asked her how long this had been going on, and she said it was since the first time that they met. And now I'm ignoring my sister until she goes to college. Story time about how my best friend kissed the guy that I liked right in front of me. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. And we're gonna call my best friend Sophia. We were in a friend group of 3. And the other person in our friend group, his name was Josh. And that just happened to be the boy that I really liked. And Sophia knew how much I liked him. Like, I would tell her all the time how excited I was, you know, that we were hanging out. And she would be like, oh my god, I'm so happy for you. Like, you guys would be so cute. Just a bunch of fake shit. So the one day we're all sitting in our free period, super bored, and our friend Dylan says, hey, why don't we play spin the bottle? With a water bottle, of course. So it was us 4 and a few other kids from our class. Well, Sophia decided to spin the bottle first. And of course, who does it land on? Josh. And I'm sitting back like I have nothing to worry about. My best friend wouldn't do that to me. Well, of course, I was wrong. I thought she was going to apologize, but after she gave me a very smirky smile, well, they started hanging out more and I felt extremely left out, so I just decided to forgive her. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready. And I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking. He was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back. It's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, hey, can I talk to you? I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here. And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home. Like, okay, sis. Story time about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse. And I had been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid. And just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7 and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Story time about why I will never ever ride in an Uber ever again. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So my parents decided to go away for the weekend. They wanted to go and visit some family who lived like 2 hours away. So I decided that it was a good idea to invite my friends and my boyfriend and his friends over for a sleepover. And once we were all at my house, we realized that we were pretty bored, so we decided to go to the fair. So we decided to go to the fair around 9:15. But because we were all lazy AF, we decided to just get an Uber to the fair instead of driving. The Uber there was fine. We went, we had a super great time, and then it was time to go home. It said our Uber was going to come at 10:30, but instead it came at 10:45, which I didn't think was a big deal because Ubers are late sometimes. So we all got into the Uber, and mind you, my house was literally 15 minutes away. So I ended up taking a nap because I was really tired, and then I woke up, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never ever ever ride in an Uber ever again. So like I said, my house was only 15 minutes away. So since I was really tired from the fair, I decided to take a nap. Well, I woke up 20 minutes later and we were in the middle of nowhere. Like when I tell you, we were on a road that literally just kept on going. I asked my boyfriend where we were and he said that we had been on this road for a while. So at this point, we're all texting each other. And all of our friends are saying, no, we're fine, this is the way. So then I look up my address on Google Maps, and we are 45 minutes away from my house. So then I send it in the group chat, and now everybody starts to freak out. Not to mention, our Uber driver was on the phone the whole time, but he had his AirPods in, and we couldn't understand anything that he was saying. So that's when my friend Sophie, she was in the front seat, she shoved the directions in his face, and was like, I think you're going the wrong way. So then he busts a U-turn, and he's yelling at this point on the phone. And an hour later, we make it back to my house. I have a feeling if it wasn't for my friend Sophie, we wouldn't have made it out of there. Story time about my toxic ex-best friend. So a little background information. I had a very close guy friend who we're gonna call Max. Now, Max was 2 years older than me, but due to our families being super close, him and I became best friends. Growing up, I saw him as kind of an older brother, and then eventually as we grew up, I saw him as my best friend. Until I realized that he was actually a terrible person, and I missed all of the signs that he was not a real friend. Like one, our first fight, I told him something that I didn't want anybody else knowing. And what do you know, right after I tell him, my family knows, his family knows, my crush knows, all of our friends know. After this, I probably should have distanced myself, but he apologized and we became friends again. That was sign number one. Sign number two, his huge change in attitude. 1 second, he would be extremely rude to me, and then he would be this really sweet and caring guy, and his apologies were the best. So it was really hard not to forgive him. He was like a master manipulator. Number three, we only talked whenever it was convenient for him. Like seriously, we would never talk unless he needed something, like for part two. Part two about my toxic ex-best friend. I think we left off on sign number 3, which was the only time that we would talk was when it was convenient for him. He would never reach out, which left me being the one who was constantly trying to preserve our friendship or whatever was left of it. Like all of our messages were literally me, and it made me seem really needy and like I was putting in way too much effort because he would literally answer with the most simple messages. Like, yeah, okay. Sure. And he would only talk to me whenever he wasn't with his friends. Sign number 4. It felt like he was embarrassed of me. Now, I know that I was 2 years younger than him, but we were still friends, and I really don't think that's that much of a difference. Like, he would never want to be seen with me. The last sign, he would literally always talk about me behind my back. And I thought this was just rumors at first, until finally several people told me that it was not a rumor. He would say things like, oh, she's ugly, she's so immature, she's annoying and childish, she's so annoying. And then I finally decided to cut him off. Because if the bad outweighed the good, was it really worth keeping that person in my life? Story time about my toxic best friend group. So a little background information. I was 16, and it was the end of 9th grade going into summer break. And one day randomly, these 3 girls added me on Snapchat and put me into a group chat. Now, I had seen them around school, but I never said hi to them. I was finding it very hard to make friends in 9th grade because everybody was so toxic. Anyways, like I said, they added me to a group chat, and all of them said hi to me. And usually I wouldn't respond to random people on Snapchat, but because I had seen them around school, I decided why not. And it was so random, they just started sending pictures of themselves into this group chat, and it low-key made me feel bad because I kind of hated my physical appearance. But anyways, they asked me if I wanted to be friends with them. Oh, and by the way, their names were Stacy, Savannah, and Emily. So of course I said yeah because it was hard for me to make friends. So fast forward, my birthday was coming up. So they asked me if we could hang out. They said they wanted to give me an early birthday present. So I said yes, of course. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my toxic friend group. So like I said, they asked me if we could hang out to give me an early birthday present. So I said yeah. And Emily had a pool at her house, so they asked me if I wanted to go over there. And of course I said yeah, it was summertime and it was hot outside. Well, when I got there, they asked me to order the pizza and they said that I had to pay for it. So I said yeah, because they were my besties at the time. So I used some of my birthday money to pay for the pizza for all of us. And when I got back to Emily's house, they were all already in the pool. So I was kind of mad. 1, because they didn't go with me, and 2, they were just hanging out without me. So we're sitting there eating the pizza. And then after, all 3 of them get in the pool and they start taking pictures with each other, not even asking me to be in any pictures. So at that point, I was so annoyed. I was just like, you guys are being so rude. And Emily's like, what are you talking about? We didn't even do anything. And then, of course, Stacy and Savannah agreed. So I was like, 1, you didn't even ask me to be in any pictures and you made me pay for the pizza for all of us. And she was like, you're ugly. We didn't want you in the pictures. So I threw the pizza away and went, story time about how I was almost kidnapped. So a little background information, I was 13 and it was the summer going into 9th grade. I was on a road trip with my family and we needed to stop for some gas. So we stopped at some random gas station and we see this lady get out of her car and walk in.
No big deal though. So we're inside and we're waiting in line to use the bathroom. So we were in the front of the line and then that lady was behind us. And then there were a few people behind her. So as we're standing in line, she FaceTimes some guy. And then she starts pointing the camera at people around the store. And she would be like, oh, do you like this? And he would say yes or no. Well, then she points the phone at me. And then he goes, yeah, that's the one. And my mom and I were super creeped out about this because she was being super loud and she was taking a really long time at this gas station. So my mom goes into the bathroom and then she starts to talk to me. She starts asking how old I am, where I'm from, and if my mom and I were here with anybody else. Like for part
Story time about the worst day of my life. So a little background information. I was 16 at the time, and I was either in 8th grade or 9th grade, but I really don't remember. And I had this boyfriend who we are going to call Cameron. We had been dating for 3 years, but before him and I got together, we were best friends. Well, I also was in a friend group with myself, Amber, and this girl named Sky. Now, I wouldn't really call Sky a pick-me girl. She was more of a jealous best friend. For example, the one day we went shopping for dresses, and I picked this one out that I really liked and that looked super good on me. Amber was like, OMG, you look so beautiful. And then Sky, she was like, that dress is ugly and it makes you look fat. Well, after that, I told her I didn't care what she said and that I was going to get the dress anyways. Well, she didn't like the fact that I wasn't going to listen to her, so she didn't talk to me for 2 whole weeks. And then after, she texted me saying that she forgives me, even though I didn't apologize, but okay. Well then, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Bad idea, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst day of my life. So like I said, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Well, after that, Cameron started acting really weird. Like him and I, we would literally hang out with each other 24/7. And now he was always too busy for me and we would only talk at school. And because I was in all the smart classes and stuff, I would go over to his house to tutor him. Because, you know, I was like the one who was winning every single fucking award for being smart. Well, I came over on the day that I would usually tutor him. And when I went over there, his mom was like, oh, he's busy. He's out with his friends. So then I went home and I got bored and I opened Instagram. Well, I see that he's at a party with Sky and they didn't even invite me. So I asked him about it, and he said, oh, it was her and her boyfriend's party. So I was like, that wasn't really an excuse for why you didn't invite me. So he apologized and I forgave him. Well, 5 weeks later, I found out that him and her did the nasty, and she got pregnant. And then there was a rumor going around that they made out in the bathroom. So I blocked both of them and never saw them again. Story time about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on an all-girls trip. So a little background information, I was 14 or 15 around the time, and it was the summer of my freshman year. So within the last few weeks of my 8th grade year, one of the more popular boys asked me out, and we're gonna call him Carson. I wasn't like super popular at the school, but I was like a medium maybe. But I was raised in a super strict household, where the only phone that I pretty much had was one that was able to call 911 and my parents. And I especially was not allowed to be talking to boys. So Carson had the great idea of giving me his old phone, and throughout the summer, I would text him on there. Well, I started realizing him getting really toxic. Anytime that he would see my Snapchat location change, he would be like, where are you going? Why didn't you tell me you were going here? So I started distancing myself a little bit from him. Also because our relationship was just moving way too fast. Within the first month of us dating, he was talking about wanting to marry me. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip. So like I said, I started distancing myself from him because he became too attached and was just way too toxic. Well, I was also in a lot of clubs in school, and a few of them would require me to go on trips. Well, the one that I went on was an all-girls trip, and before I left, I texted Carson letting him know that I wouldn't have my phone all week. Well, on the last night of my trip, there was a girls and boys dance. There was like a group of boys from a different school that we were meeting up with. And I tried staying back at the cabin, but they wouldn't let me. So we started doing dances that required partners. So I was pretty much forced to dance with one of the boys. Well, when I came back home, I got 100 texts from Carson calling me a bunch of nasty names, and you can probably guess them. And somebody got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys. And Carson sent it to me and said, we're done. So after that, I just ignored him. And then literally that night at 1 a.m., he was texting me saying, I miss you, please come back to me, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip.
So like I said, I received over 100 messages from him. He got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys and said, we're done. And then at 1 a.m, he's like, I miss you so much. Please don't leave me. Like, I've been doing so bad while you were gone. So of course I didn't accept his apology and I just blocked him on all my social media. And the next day I wake up to messages on my Instagram, my Snapchat, my Facebook. Like, who even uses that? Unless you're talking to family. Well, then Carson decides to tell everybody at my school about how I'm a lying, cheating scumbag. And now, 3 years later, no good guy from my school wants to date me. So now whenever I'm talking to a guy, I have to make sure that they're not affiliated with Carson in any way. But low-key, I had a really good glow-up, so all the hot boys want to talk to me now. And Carson's pretty much still a scumbag.
Story time, my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information. So Gavin and I had been best friends ever since we were little. We lived in the same neighborhood, and my parents and his grandparents were like pretty close, I guess. But like everybody in our neighborhood was close with each other. And I always had a huge crush on him. And I would try to like subtly tell him that I liked him. But he would always be like, ew, don't joke with me like that. Like, that's not true. And eventually, I just kind of got the hint that that was his way of telling me, I don't like you. Stop before I tell you, in a mean way. So when we were in middle school, he was always having these like 2-day relationships with all these girls and everything. And me, not so much, because sis didn't have a glow up until she reached like her sophomore year in high school. And the thing was, I wasn't that best friend who would be like, ew, don't date her, like she's ugly or anything like that. Like, I would totally respect all of his relationships, even if they were 2 days long, but he would literally still block me. Well, the one day we were hanging out at his house, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So like I said, the one night I was at his house and he was on my phone and he was asking me who all these guys were on my Snapchat. And I told him that I had been talking to them and he was just being super toxic. He was talking shit on every single one of them. So eventually I started dating this guy, Trey, and after that he texted me saying that I was gross and everything else, when the next day he literally got a girlfriend. But weirdly enough, he didn't block me that time. He actually started texting me more, saying how him and his girlfriend were so happy together, da-da-da-da-da. And unlike him, I would be supportive. Well, the one night at 2 a.m., he came over my house, and he was like, I don't have feelings for my girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, then why are you with her? And then he has the nerve to say, don't you get that I like you? Like, really? Well, eventually we cut off all communication and he was still with this girl. Well, the one night he asked me to come over and talk, and we ended up doing the nasty. And then he blocked me on everything, after he said we should both leave our girlfriends and boyfriends. Well, I ended up telling his girlfriend what we did, and they also come to my family cookouts.
Story time about how I crashed my dad's really expensive car. So a little background information. My mom had just got remarried to my stepdad 3 years ago, and he was this rich asshole who owned a bunch of food trucks and thought he was the shit. Well, at the time I also had a boyfriend, and we had only been dating for like a month and a half. But my boyfriend would always beg me to let him drive my stepdad's car, and I always said no because that was like his child. Like, he had children. He could care less about them. His car was more important. Anyway, so the one weekend my parents are out of town and one of my friends was throwing a graduation party. So that whole day my boyfriend was trying to talk me into taking the car, and I already knew where my stepdad hid the keys. So I just decided I wouldn't drink that night and I would just take the car. He kept asking me if he could drive, but clearly I said no, because this kid literally told me that he crashed the first 2 cars that he had. So we get to the party, we're having a good time, and one of my friends tells me that everybody's taking pictures with my car outside. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I crashed my dad's very expensive car. So like I said, everybody's taking pictures of the car, but I decided to let it go at first. I mean, there was one point where I went outside just so that way I could kind of let everybody know, hey, you're taking pictures with my car. Well, half an hour later, my boyfriend and I decided to leave, and he's obliterated. Like, we probably got 50 feet from her house, and then I had to stop the car so that way he could get out and throw up in somebody's yard. Anyway, so he gets in the car, we're on the way back to my house, and my house was like a 20-minute drive away. Well, we were 5 minutes from my house. At this one intersection, I get a green light and I go to make a right, and I accidentally hit a car turning out of the bar parking lot. So I'm literally freaking the fuck out. And my boyfriend's in the seat next to me crying for some reason. So the guy in the other car calls the cops. The cops show up, they call my stepdad and my mom. My boyfriend went to the hospital, he had alcohol poisoning. Well, my boyfriend told his mom that it was all my fault and I'm grounded for 6 months. Story time about my shitty ass ex-boyfriend. So a little background information. My ex and I have been dating for about 2 years. And throughout those 2 years, he was a dick. He would cheat on me, talk to other girls more than me, but of course I pretended that everything was perfect in my relationship. I would brag to all these people about how my relationship was so good, blah blah blah, and everything else. Because it's embarrassing whenever bitches can talk shit because your relationship is very toxic. Like, listen to this bullshit. The whole 2 years we were dating, I had over 10 girls DM me on Instagram saying that they screwed my boyfriend at his house. I never confronted him about it. I was just one of those girls that cared way too much about what everybody else thought. Okay, now fast forward. And it was a Friday at school, and Thanksgiving break was the following day. And him and I have this whole plan to spend the whole break together, because literally a week before that, he was on vacation in North Carolina for 2 whole weeks. Well, instead of going with him after school, I decided to go home, get an overnight bag like for part 2. Part 2 about my shitty ex-boyfriend. So like I said, the original plan was for us to go together to his house after school. But I was like, I'm going to be spending the whole week over there. I should probably pack some clothes and get a shower. So after school, he drove me to my house. And he said that his parents wanted to have dinner together, so he had to go back to his house. And he would pick me up later. So when I got to my house, I got ready and everything, blah, blah, blah. And by this time, it was like 8 o'clock. So I kept texting and calling him, asking him where he's at, if he's coming to get me still. Then I realized that none of my text messages were going through. So then I go to text him on Snap. And what do you know? I couldn't find him on there. And then I call him off my mom's phone. He answers the phone and hangs up right away. Well, we were supposed to have a little party at his house too, that all of my friends were going to. So I texted every single one of them. None of them answered the phone. And I remembered that my one friend had shared her location with me before. So I went and looked at her location and where was she at? My boyfriend's house. So while I sat at home crying that whole week, he was throwing parties and cheating on me with my friends. And when we went back to school, he acted like we were never in a relationship.